In the winter of 1882, in a Montana town so cold the window glass turned white from the inside, a man bought Mara Holt for $72. And the strangest part was not the money, it was the receipt. A narrow scrap of paper, folded twice, tucked inside a flour sack like it belonged with salt and beans and coffee. Paid in full, it said, $72 for household service for one adult female. As if Mara were a stove or a plow or a mare too tired to pull. She was 20 years old, standing beside the freight door of the Mercer Creek Depot with everything she owned tied inside a carpet bag. Her wool coat was too thin. Her boots had newspaper stuffed into the soles. Every few breaths, she had to press her fingers together to make sure she could still feel them. Behind her, her uncle Jonas Pell stamped his feet and cursed the weather. He was a narrow man with a narrow mouth, and every kindness in him had been squeezed out years before Mara came under his roof. He had taken her in after the fever took her parents. He had taken her mother's silver buttons. He had taken the little money her father left. And now, with the money gone and winter pressing hard, he had taken the last thing he could sell. Her. "Stand straight," Jonas muttered. He didn't ride 30 miles to buy a scarecrow. Mara looked across the snowy street. A wagon waited near the depot rail. 2 workhorses stood in their traces, heads low, steam rising off their backs. On the bench sat a man in a black coat dusted with ice. He was broad through the shoulders, dark-haired, unshaved, and still as a fence post in a storm. Elias Rourke. That was the name Jonas had given her the night before, as if a name could make a future less terrifying. Widower, rancher, 3 children, needs help, pays cash. Those had been the facts, nothing more. Elias climbed down from the wagon when Jonas waved him over. He moved like a man who had learned not to waste strength. It crunched into the frozen mud. His gray scarf was tied tight at his throat. One of his gloves was split across the knuckles. Jonas gave him the smile he saved for deals. "This is her, Mara Holt. Can cook, sew, wash, read a Bible, keep accounts if you write clear enough. Stronger than she looks." Elias did not look at Jonas. He looked at Mara. Not the way men usually looked when they were measuring usefulness. Not hungry, not amused. Just tired. His eyes were a brown so dark they looked almost black under the brim of his hat. "Did he tell you where you're going?" Elias asked. His voice was rough but not cruel. Mara nodded. "Ranch. Did he tell you what work waits there? Children, house, cooking, washing, whatever winter hasn't already ruined." A flicker crossed his face, maybe surprise. "Did he tell you there is no easy part?" Mara lifted her chin. "I wasn't expecting easy." The answer made Jonas snort. Elias finally turned to him. "We agreed on 60. Jonas's smile thinned. "Roads are worse now. She's worth more today than she was last week." A long silence passed. The horses shifted. The wind scraped snow across the depot boards like sand. Mara felt heat climb into her cheeks, not from warmth, from humiliation. Elias reached inside his coat and pulled out a folded leather purse, counted bills into Jonas's hand. $72. Jonas counted them twice. Then he produced the paper. "The receipt," he said. Elias stared at it. "That's not necessary." "It is for me." Mara watched Elias take it slowly, like touching it dirtied him. He folded it once, then again, and tucked it into the flour sack on the wagon instead of his pocket. Jonas never hugged her, never said goodbye. He just stepped back into the depot, $72 richer, and left Mara in the street with a stranger. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Elias picked up her carpet bag. "The road home is bad," he said. "If we leave now, we'll reach the ranch before dark." Home. Mara climbed onto the wagon. The bench was narrow. Elias sat beside her, close enough that she could see the snow melting in his beard. He flipped the reins and Mercer Creek began to fall away behind them. No church bells, no farewell, no witness except the wind. They rode for a long time without speaking. The wagon tracks cut through white hills and frozen grass. The sky hung low and iron-colored. Once a coyote crossed the road ahead of them, thin as a shadow. Elias watched it go, then kept driving. After nearly an hour, Mara asked the question she had been holding since the depot. What were their names? Elias did not answer right away. He said, "Will is 14, Toby is 10, Lila is 6. How long since their mother died?" His jaw tightened. 8 months. Only 8 months. Mara turned her face toward the wind and swallowed the apology before it could come out. There were griefs too fresh for strangers to touch. The Rourke place appeared near dusk. It was not a house so much as a stubborn shape in a field of snow. Low roof, stone chimney, barn leaning to the east. A line of fence almost buried beneath drifts. The place looked like it had survived by refusing to notice it was falling apart. Smoke rose from the chimney, thin and blue. Elias stopped the wagon. "Inside," he said. "They're waiting." Mara stepped down and nearly sank to her knees in snow. She carried her carpet bag to the porch. The boards groaned under her boots. For one breath, her hand hovered over the latch. Then she opened the door. Warmth met her first, then silence. 3 children stood in the main room. The oldest boy, Will, had his father's dark eyes and his mother's absence carved into his face. He stood with one shoulder against the wall, arms crossed, looking at Mara like she was a thief entering a church. Toby was smaller and freckled, with hay-colored hair and a nervous mouth. He kept twisting a button on his shirt. Lila stood near the stove, clutching a rag doll with one missing eye. Her hair was pale brown, chopped unevenly, as if someone had tried and failed to cut out tangles. She did not blink. Mara set down her bag. "Hello," she said. Will's eyes narrowed. "Are you the woman he bought?" The words struck the room flat. Toby looked at the floor. Lila hugged the doll tighter. Behind Mara, the door opened again. Elias stepped inside, bringing the cold with him. "Will." "I heard you," Will said, still looking at Mara. "Pell told Mr. Danner at the feed store. Said Pa paid more because winter made her valuable." Elias went very still. Mara felt the floor shift under her, though she knew it had not moved. She could lie. she could soften it. Mara felt the floor shift under her, though she knew it had not moved. She could lie. She could soften it. She could pretend the boy had misunderstood. Instead, she said, "Your father paid my uncle. That much is true." Will's mouth twisted. "Then you're not family. You're not even help. You're property." Elias's voice cracked through the room. "Enough!" But Mara raised one hand. "No," she said softly. "Let him say what he's afraid of." Will looked startled. Mara met his eyes. "I am not your mother," she said. "I won't wear her apron. I won't sit in her chair unless someone asks me. I won't tell you to feel something you don't. But I can make bread. I can mend shirts, little girl, if she lets me. And I can keep this house from swallowing all of you whole." Will said nothing. Elias said nothing. Only Lila moved. She took one tiny step closer, then stopped. That was the beginning. Not love, not trust. Just a step. The first night, Mara slept in a narrow pantry room that smelled of apples gone soft in a crate. The mattress was lumpy, the blanket thin, and the window rattled whenever the wind hit the north wall. But no one shouted at her through the door. No one took her supper away because she answered too slowly. No one counted coins at the table while deciding what she was worth. So Mara lay awake in the dark and told herself it was better. By dawn, she was up. The fire had fallen to embers. She coaxed it back to life, found flour in a bin, sliced salt pork thin, mixed biscuits with cold fingers, and set coffee to boil. When the children came in, they stopped. The table was laid. 3 tin cups, 4 plates, butter scraped into a small dish, biscuits steaming beneath a cloth. Toby stared at the food as if he had forgotten tables could look that way. Lila climbed into her chair without speaking. Will remained by the doorway. "Nobody asked you," he said. Mara wiped flour from her hands. "No." "Then why do it?" "Because hungry children get mean, and mean children make a long winter longer." Toby gave a little surprised laugh, then swallowed it. Will glared at him. Elias came in from the barn at that moment, snow on his shoulders. He saw the table, then Mara, then the children. Something moved behind his eyes. A memory, maybe. He sat down. "Eat," he said. They ate, not happily, not as a family, but they ate. Days began to stack one on top of another. Mara learned the shape of the house, which floorboards cried out at night, which stove hinge stuck, which corner of the roof leaked when the snow softened. She learned that Toby hid broken things because he thought broken things were punished. She learned that Lila did not speak before noon. She learned that Will rose earlier than everyone, not because he liked work, but because he did not trust the world to keep standing if he slept too long. She learned Elias kept grief like a tool in his pocket, always there, always sharp, always handled when no one was looking. He worked until his hands cracked open. He patched fence in weather that froze breath to scarf wool. He carried feed sacks until his limp showed. Then he stopped limping the moment anyone noticed. He did not thank Mara often, but he left split kindling beside the stove. He fixed the pantry window with oiled cloth. He found a pair of wool stockings in town and placed them outside her door without a word. Mara did not thank him either, not out loud. She wore the stockings until the heels thinned. By the third week, Toby began trailing her from room to room. He never asked to help. He simply appeared. When she washed, he carried water. When she kneaded bread, he sprinkled flour. When she patched his coat, he sat close enough to watch every stitch. One afternoon she found him behind the barn, trying to repair a cracked lantern frame with wire and stubborn hope. "May I see it?" she asked. He handed it over like it was a secret. Mara studied the twisted metal. "Needs a brace." I tried. "I know. Trying is where fixing starts." Together they bent the wire and set the lantern straight. Toby smiled so quickly, Mara almost missed it. Lila was different. Lila watched, from doorways, from under tables, from the corner near the stove. She watched Mara peel potatoes, sweep ash, sew buttons, braid her own hair at night. Then, one evening, as Mara sat mending by lamplight, Lila came to her with the rag doll. "Her dress is torn," she whispered. It was the first full sentence Mara had heard from her. Mara set down Will's shirt as if the world had not just shifted. "Then we'd better mend it." Lila climbed into her lap without asking. Mara stitched a patch onto the doll's faded dress, red calico from a flour sack. Crooked at one corner, but neat enough. Lila touched it. "Mama used red." Mara's throat tightened. "Then red was the right choice." Lila leaned against her and stayed there until she fell asleep. Will saw it. He said nothing, but the next morning the water bucket was full before Mara reached for it. February deepened. Then March came in like a hammer, rolled down from the Little Belt Mountains, and buried the ranch for 2 days. Snow blocked the door. The barn roof groaned. The chickens stopped laying. The creek froze hard enough that Elias had to break it with an axe. On the third night, Lila coughed. At first it was small. By dawn her cheeks burned red and her eyes would not focus. Elias hitched a horse to ride for the doctor, but he returned before noon, face gray. "Road's gone," he said. "Drifts higher than the horse." Mara did not answer. She was already boiling water. For 3 days Lila burned. Mara sat beside her bed and measured time by cloths turning warm on the child's forehead. She made willow bark tea, spooned broth past clenched teeth. She sang the hymns her mother used to sing, low and rough because her own voice had nearly given out. Elias stood in the doorway more than once, helpless in a way strong men hate most. Will stood beside him, fists clenched. On the second night he asked, "Is she going to die?" Mara looked up from the basin. "No, you don't know that." "No," Mara said, "but she needs someone in this room who speaks as if she is staying." Will stared at her. Then he came inside and sat on the floor. At dawn on the 4th day, Lila opened her eyes. "Mara," she whispered, "I'm thirsty." Elias covered his face with both hands, fast but not fast enough to hide the tears. Mara lifted the cup to Lila's mouth. The girl drank. After that, the house changed. Not all at once. Grief does not leave because a child survives fever. But something loosened. Lila began speaking in the mornings. Toby began laughing without looking guilty afterward. Will stopped calling Mara that woman and started calling her by her name. Elias started lingering at the table after supper. Sometimes he would speak. Only small things, a fence line that needed moving before thaw, a calf expected soon, a neighbor named Caleb Prentice who wanted more water rights than God had granted him. But he asked Mara what she thought. And Mara, who had spent years being told her thoughts were a luxury, answered. One evening in April, she found Elias behind the barn, sitting on an overturned bucket, holding the receipt from the flour sack. The paper had softened at the folds. $72 for household service for one adult female. Mara stopped. I wondered where it went. Elias looked up. Shame moved across his face. I should have burned it. Why didn't you? He rubbed the paper between his fingers, because part of me thought I might need proof. Proof of what? That I did not steal you. Mara felt the cold settle back into her bones. Proof of what? That I did not steal you. Mara felt the cold settle back into her bones. And did proof make it cleaner? No. He stared at the paper. It made it worse. The wind lifted loose straw around them. Elias said, I was desperate. That's not an excuse, just the truth. The children were drowning in this house. I was drowning with them. When Pell said he had a niece who needed placement, I told myself paying him was a kindness, because he would turn you out otherwise. Mara gave a small, bitter laugh. He would have. I know. That doesn't make it kindness. No, Elias said. It makes it a bargain with a rotten man. He held the receipt out to her. It belongs to you. Mara took it. For a moment she wanted to tear it, to burn it, to grind it under her heel. Instead, she folded it carefully and tucked it into her dress pocket. Not yet, she said. Elias watched her. Why keep it? Because someday I want to look at this paper and not feel smaller than it. He did not answer, but from that day on, he never spoke of her as help. Not to the children, not to neighbors, not even by accident. Spring came hard and muddy. The drifts collapsed into brown water. Wagon ruts filled knee-deep. The creek broke open and ran silver beneath cottonwood roots. The ranch woke angry. Fences sagged. A heifer calved too early. Coyotes took 2 hens. The garden had to be turned before rain made the soil useless. Mara worked until her shoulders ached. So did everyone else. Even Lila carried eggs in both hands like treasure. One afternoon, Will tried to lead a half-wild yearling through the south gate alone. The animal jerked, slammed him into the rail, and sent him sprawling in the mud. Elias ran to him, fury and fear tangled together. What were you thinking? Will pushed himself up, face white. That it needed moving? You could have been killed. I wasn't. Because luck had mercy on your foolishness. Will's eyes flashed. You won't let me do anything unless you can stand over me. Because you're 14. Because you're scared. The words hit harder than a fist. Elias went silent. Will wiped mud from his cheek. I know Ma died. I know Lila got sick. But if you keep holding us like glass, we'll break anyway. Then he walked away. Elias stood in the yard, breathing hard. Mara came to his side. He shouldn't have taken the yearling alone, she said. No. But he wasn't wrong. Elias looked at her, wounded. Mara kept her voice gentle. A boy can't become steady if every chance to learn is taken from him. I can't lose him. I know. No, you don't. Mara faced him. I lost a mother, a father, a home, a name people respected, and the right to decide where I slept. I know what losing does. I also know fear can become a locked door. Sometimes children grow up on the other side of it. Elias looked away toward the creek. That night, after supper, he handed Will a coil of rope. Tomorrow, Elias said, we move that yearling together. You lead. I stand back unless you ask. Will blinked, then nodded. It was not an apology, but it was the first plank in a bridge. By May, Mara forgot to count the days since she had arrived. That frightened her more than she expected. Survival had always been measured by days. How many days until Jonas was drunk enough to sleep? How many days until flour ran out? How many days until she turned 21 and could claim what remained of her father's money? Before she learned there was nothing left to claim. At the Rourke Ranch, time started moving differently. Measured by bread rising, seedlings breaking soil, Lila's braids staying neat until noon, Toby's lantern burning straight, Will's voice cracking and deepening in the same week. Elias smiling once when Mara dropped a sack of beans and cursed like a mule driver. Happiness came in so quietly, she nearly mistook it for a mistake. Then town found out. It happened on a Sunday. They had gone to church in Mercer Creek because Lila begged to wear her blue ribbon, and Toby wanted to see the new bell. Mara sat at the end of the pew beside the children. Elias sat on the other side of Lila, shoulders stiff, hat in his lap. During the final hymn, two women behind them whispered. Mara heard only pieces. Bought her, living there. No ring. Poor children. Her face burned. Will heard too. His ears went red. After service, Mrs. Danner from the feed store stopped Mara by the door and smiled in a way that was all teeth. "Miss Holt," she said, "or is it Mrs. Rourke now? I get so confused these days." Elias stepped forward. Mara touched his sleeve before he could speak. Mara said, "And I am not confused." Mrs. Danner's smile froze. By the time they reached the wagon, Will was shaking. "Why do they talk like that?" Elias said, "Because some people have empty lives and need to fill them with other folks' pain." "That's not an answer." "No," Mara said, "it's not." Elias looked at her. Mara climbed onto the wagon and said nothing the whole way home. That evening, after the children slept, Elias found her in the pantry room packing her carpet bag. He stopped in the doorway. "No." Mara kept folding her dress. "You don't know what I'm doing." "I know exactly what you're doing." She swallowed. "The children will suffer for it. You heard them. Lila will hear worse. Toby will get into fights. Your name will turn into a joke in town. Let it. You say that because you're angry." "I say that because it's true." Mara turned on him. "You can survive a ruined name. Men always do. Women and children pay the bill." That silenced him. She gripped the dress in both hands. "I won't be the reason your children are shamed." Elias's face tightened. "You think leaving won't shame them?" "It will hurt them for a while." "For a while?" His voice broke. "Lila calls you her safe place. Toby saves bent nails because you told him broken things can be useful. Will listens when you speak because you don't treat him like a boy or a burden. And you think walking out with a note would hurt for a while?" Tears rose in Mara's eyes. I don't belong here. Yes, you do. Not in any way the world respects. Then let me make it plain. Mara went still. Elias took one step closer, then stopped as if afraid to crowd her. I have wanted to ask you for weeks. Don't, she whispered. I have. Don't ask me because of gossip. I'm not. Don't ask me because you're afraid I'll leave. I am afraid you'll leave, he said, but that is not why. His voice lowered. I loved Agnes. I still do. A piece of me will always stand by her grave. For months I thought that meant the rest of me had to stay buried too. Mara could barely breathe. Elias looked at her as if every word cost him. Then you came into this house, carrying nothing but a bag and a receipt that should never have existed. You fed my children. You fought fever. You spoke truth when I wanted comfort. You made this place breathe again. He reached into his vest and pulled out a small ring, plain gold, worn thin on the underside. Agnes's mother gave this to her. Agnes told me if I ever lived long enough to love again, I should not insult her by pretending the dead need more loyalty than the living. Mara covered her mouth. Elias's hand shook. I am asking because I love you, Mara Holt. Not as help, not as mercy, not as protection from talk, as the woman I look for whenever I come home. The pantry room blurred through tears. Say it again, Mara whispered. I love you. She laughed once, broken and soft. Then she nodded. Yes. Elias closed his eyes as if the word had struck him in the chest. When he opened them, Mara was already in his arms. Plays 4 days later in the little white church with mud on the steps and gossip in the pews. Mara wore a green dress Mrs. Patterson from the general store altered overnight. Lila carried wild violets in a jar. Toby polished his boots until they looked almost black. Will stood beside Elias, tall and solemn, holding the ring like it was something sacred. When the minister asked who gave the bride, nobody moved. Then Will stepped forward. I do, he said. The church went silent. Mara looked at him. Will's jaw trembled, but his voice held. Because she gave us back first. Elias bowed his head. Mara cried through half the vows, but pronounced them husband and wife. Elias kissed her gently, as though asking permission even then. Behind them, Lila clapped so hard the violets jumped in the jar. For 2 weeks the ranch felt almost easy. Almost. Then Caleb Prentice came for the creek. Prentice owned the spread east of them. Twice as many cattle and half as much patience. He arrived with 2 riders and a lawyer's letter claiming the creek bend below the cottonwoods belonged to him by old survey. If he won, the Rourkes would lose their best grazing water before summer. Elias read the letter once, then twice. His face went hard. We can't fight this in court, Mara said quietly that night. I know. Then we find what he wants. He wants land. No, Mara said. Men with land always say they want land. Usually they want something simpler. The next morning she rode with Elias to Prentice's place. The house was painted, the barn was straight, the cattle were fat. Prentice met them on the porch, pleased with himself. Mara asked to see the survey. He almost laughed. Then he looked at Elias's expression and brought it out. She studied the map, the creek bend, the fence line, the low trail through the willows. Then she saw it. "You don't need the bend," she said. "You need the crossing." Prentice's smile faded. "Map. Your cattle have water. What they don't have is a safe route when the upper wash floods. You take the bend, you get the crossing, and punish us at the same time." Elias looked at her. Prentice said nothing. Mara folded her hands. "We will give seasonal passage at the willow crossing in writing. Twice a week in dry months. No grazing, no fence cutting, no claim to the bend. You drop the survey challenge." Prentice leaned back. "Your wife speaks like a lawyer." "My wife speaks like someone who listens," Elias said. The agreement was signed before sundown. On the ride home, Elias kept glancing at her. "What?" she asked. "Thinking $72 was a crime." Mara looked at him. He smiled faintly. "And still not half enough for what I got." She tried not to smile back. Failed. Summer came cold and restless. The garden gave beans, onions, squash. Toby built a proper latch for the chicken coop. Lila learned to read from a primer Mara found in town. Will began working 2 days a week with a carpenter, coming home smelling of fresh pine and sawdust, happier than he knew how to admit. Elias healed in ways that did not show on the body. He spoke Agnes's name without breaking. He visited her grave with the children. He asked Mara to come once, and she did. The grave sat beneath a cottonwood near the creek, the marker silvered by weather. Mara stood back, but Elias reached for her hand. "I thought loving you meant leaving her behind," he said. Mara looked at the marker. "Maybe love doesn't leave the room just because new love enters." He nodded. The next week, they planted a young apple tree near the cottonwood. Lila asked why. Mara said, "So the past and the future can share shade." Elias looked at her for a long time after that. The fire came in September, not from their stove, not from lightning, from a careless camp beyond the ridge, where 2 freight men left coals under dry grass and rode away, neared the horizon. By 2, the wind changed. Elias saw it first. "Get the children." Mara stepped onto the porch and saw the line of flame crawling fast through the grass. Not tall, not yet, but hungry. They had maybe an hour, maybe less. What happened next became family history, told for years with different details depending on who told it. Toby swore Mara gave orders like a general. Will claimed Elias cursed louder than the fire. Lila insisted the apple tree shook because it was scared. The truth was simpler. They worked. Will and Elias cut a fire break with plows and shovels. Toby hauled water until his arms shook. Lila carried wet sacks one by one from the pump to the porch. Mara beat sparks from the garden fence and dragged trunks away from the barn wall. Smoke burned her eyes. Ash stuck to her tongue. The fire reached the west pasture and leapt a ditch like it had legs. A burning rail cracked loose from the fence and fell near the hay shed. Elias ran for it. The shed roof collapsed before he reached the door. Mara heard him shout. She ran through smoke so thick the world vanished. "Elias!" No answer. She found him on one knee beside the shed, pinned by a beam across his lower leg, face streaked black, teeth clenched against pain. "Leave it," he gasped. "Get out." Mara looked at the beam. then at the fire licking along the roof edge. "No, Mara. I said no." She wedged a broken fence post under the beam and pushed with everything she had. It shifted an inch. Not enough. Will appeared through the smoke. Then Toby. Together they shoved. The beam rolled. Elias fell free. Will and Mara dragged him across the dirt as the hay shed caught fully behind them. By sunset, rain came. Hard, sudden, blessed. It beat the fire down and turned ash to black mud. The barn stood. The house stood. The apple tree stood, leaves singed brown at one edge, but alive. Elias's leg was badly bruised, not broken. He would limp for weeks and complain for longer. That night they sat on the porch wrapped in wet blankets while rain dripped from the roof. No one had strength to speak. Lila climbed into Mara's lap. Toby leaned against Will. Will leaned, just barely, against Elias. Elias took Mara's hand. His grip was muddy and warm. "We could have lost everything," he said. Mara looked at the house, the children, the wet fields, the little apple tree still standing in the dark. "No," she said, "not everything." After the fire, the Rourke place changed again. Neighbors came with lumber. Mrs. Patterson brought bread. Even Prentice sent 2 riders to mend fence, though he claimed he only did it because wandering cattle annoyed him. In the ash behind the hay shed, Mara found the receipt. She had forgotten it in a tin box on the pantry shelf. The box had fallen, burst open, and the paper lay partly burned at the edges but still readable. Paid in full. $72 for 1 adult female. Mara stood with it in her hand for a long time. Then she carried it to the apple tree. Elias followed, limping. The children gathered around without being asked. Mara dug a small hole in the damp earth. "This paper was the first thing this place gave me," she said. "Not kindness, not welcome. Proof that somebody thought I could be priced." Her voice held steady. "For a while, I kept it, because I wanted the day to come when it could not make me smaller." She looked at Will, Toby, Lila, then Elias. That day came. She set the receipt in the hole. Lila dropped in a violet gone dry from the wedding jar. Toby added a bent nail. Will placed a curl of wood from his carpenter's pocket. Elias took off his split glove, the one he had worn the day he brought Mara from Mercer Creek, and laid it on top. Then Mara covered it all with soil. No one called it a funeral, but it was one. Winter returned. This time it did not find the house hollow. There was wood stacked high beneath the eaves, beans drying in sacks, quilts repaired. A lantern in every room that Toby had fixed himself. Lila's reading primer on the table. Will's carved chair in the corner, crooked in one leg, but beautiful because his hands had made it. And in the center of it all, Mara moved through the rooms not like a servant, not like a guest, but like a woman whose footsteps belonged. On Christmas Eve, snow began to fall. Soft this time, gentle, the kind that made the prairie look forgiven. Elias stood at the window with his arm around Mara's waist. Behind them, the children argued over whether the gingerbread should be saved for morning or eaten immediately. Toby was losing. Lila had frosting on her chin. Will pretended to be above the argument, then stole the biggest piece when no one looked. Mara laughed. Elias looked down at her. "What?" She shook her head. "A year ago I thought my life had ended at a depot." His arm tightened. "And now?" She looked around the room, at the stockings, the lamplight. The 3 children who had stopped waiting for loss and started expecting breakfast. The man beside her, who had learned grief was not a grave you had to climb into. "Now," she said, "I think maybe life can begin in strange places." In February, she learned she was carrying a child. She told Elias in the barn because the house was too full of ears. For once, he had no words. He simply sat down on a feed barrel and cried. Mara laughed through her own tears. "That's not very reassuring." He reached for her, pulled her gently between his knees and rested his forehead against her middle. "I'm happy," he said. "I'm terrified. I'm grateful of it." "Me too." When they told the children, Lila screamed so loudly the horses stamped in their stalls. Toby asked if babies could be taught to hold tools. Will smiled in a quiet way that made Mara's throat hurt. "Another Rourke," he said. Mara touched his cheek. "Another one of us." The baby came in October, during rain. A girl, dark hair, strong lungs, tiny fists already angry at the world. They named her Hope. Not because their lives had become easy. They had not. There were debts, drought threats, broken axles, fever scares, arguments, seasons when the garden failed, and seasons when cattle prices dropped so hard Elias stared at ledgers until dawn. Hope had never meant ease. Mara learned that. Hope was bread rising in a cold kitchen, a boy choosing carpentry and still coming home, a child reading by lamplight, a widower saying his first wife's name without drowning in it, a woman once priced on paper, standing under an apple tree, holding a baby nobody could buy. Years later, when Hope was old enough to ask why the apple tree grew so close to the cottonwood, Mara told her the truth. Not all of it, not yet, just enough. "Because roots need room," she said, "and so do hearts." The tree grew taller. Its branches reached toward the cottonwood until the 2 shadows crossed in the afternoon. Will became a carpenter whose chairs never wobbled. Toby became the kind of man who could fix anything except his own hat, which was always crushed. Lila became a school teacher and wrote her name in beautiful blue ink. Hope grew wild and loud and fearless, with Elias's eyes and Mara's stubborn chin. And Mara kept living, not surviving, living. There is a difference. Surviving is counting coins in someone else's kitchen and wondering how much colder tomorrow can get. Living is hearing your name called from 3 rooms at once and knowing each voice expects you to answer. Surviving is being folded into a receipt, planting that receipt beneath a tree and watching roots take it apart, slowly, silently, until the thing that once named your price becomes food for something that can bloom. Mara Holt Rourke was bought for $72 on a winter morning in Montana. That was true, but it was never the whole truth. The whole truth was what came after. The bread, the fever, the fire, the vows, the children, the apple tree, the man who chose to love again The woman who learned she had never been property, no matter what any paper said. And under the Montana sky, where grief and hope grew side by side, a family once broken by loss became whole in a different shape. Not perfect, touched, but rooted, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.